What is listening and why is listening important? Also, what is the purpose of listening? And are listening skills important for those of us who are in the wedding and the event industry? You'll find out as we go along, not just in this podcast, but as we try to grow our businesses, you'll find out that a lot of the skills that we have to develop to increase our profits also come in handy when it comes to our personal relationships as well. And listening just happens to be one of those skills. So, why is listening important? Listening is important because you can't have effective communication without listening. If you've been listening for the past couple of episodes, you remember the part where we were harping on feedback, and that's essentially where listening comes into play. Because we're paying attention with our eyes and with our ears, and we're trying to read all kinds of cues, verbal cues, visual cues, body language cues, it is then that we're able to adapt and refine our communication to make sure that we achieve whatever it is that we are working on. So, if you have a bride that you are speaking with and you hope to be her wedding photographer or her wedding planner or her cake person or makeup artist, then listening is a sure way to increase the odds that you're going to get to the promised land. Because believe me, a lot of people that we interact with, not just in this industry space, but in other areas. Your coworkers at work. Let's say you still work at Zenith Bank, or you're still with the Ministry of Finance, and you're doing this wedding thing on the side. You'll find out that listening is in short supply, and people who pay attention and who don't just listen so that they can prove you wrong or say the next thing, you find that these skills are in short supply. In fact, a lot of times miscommunication occurs when there is no one listening. So if you're gabbing on and off, but you're not paying attention to what the bride is saying, there's going to be miscommunication. But then again, the converse is also the case, that if she is not listening to you, then miscommunication is going to occur. But you will find, if you agree with my own way of doing business and sales, that we should always take personal responsibility for the outcomes in all these interactions. And so, if the bride is not listening, it's because there are a couple of things that you should have been able to do on your own end that you didn't do, that would make her amenable to listening to you. And some of those things include establishing rapport and building trust. If this is your first time of listening to the podcast, just skip back out, go to the menu, scroll down. We have 150 something episodes so far, and you'll be able to find all the other episodes where I talk about things like that, establishing trust, building rapport, and all that good jazz. And then when you're done with that, you can come right back here and then press play, and let's continue the conversation. Now, what is the purpose of listening, and why is it useful? The purpose of listening depends on who you talk to. You're going to hear a couple of things, but I think you can sum it up roughly in about 2 or 3 sentences. The first purpose of listening, for those of us anyway who are business people or self-employed, we have that side gig that we're trying to beef up and grow to something useful, something valuable. The whole point of listening is to build relationships. So you have the bride before you, or the mother of the bride, or the father of the bride. The whole point of you listening is so that you can build relationships. Because we are all selling is a people business, but there are just some industries by their very nature are much more personal than others. So if you're in the event space, let's say you organize business conventions for Zenith Bank or maybe Sigma Pensions. Now, you will find that, yes, you have to be nice and personable in those settings, but somehow organizing a business seminar for Zenith Bank or Sigma Pension is not quite as personal a thing as planning someone's wedding or planning someone's baby shower or planning someone's baby dedication or baptism party or what have you. So, listening skills are especially important to those of us who are in the wedding space because we are really a people business. I mean, all business is people business, but some businesses are much more people business oriented than others. And I can speak to that from experience because my brother and I and another managing partner still do some hustles every now and then in the agro space where we try to export some stuff. And you find that when you're dealing in the commodity business, relationships, they're important, but they kind of take a backseat. People are worried about price, quality, and speed. What shipping line are you going to use? How quickly is it going to get there? What is your moisture content? What is the purity of the goods? Personality kind of takes a backseat. So for our industry, the wedding space, personality issues come all the way up, and so we have to build those relationships, and that is why we have to listen. Now, another purpose of listening is so that we understand others. For those of you who have read the old classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People, I think I read it sometime when I was in secondary school. I really should read it again so that when I quote it, I can, I'll be sure that I'm quoting it faithfully, not just the words, but the intent of the author. So there's a chapter there, I think, which is on you have to understand others first before you get understood, or something like that. Seek to understand others first before you get understood. So the purpose of listening is to understand others, and it's not just an altruistic thing. You're not just doing it because you love all of humanity and you don't care about yourself. Actually, you do it because you care a lot about yourself, and if you want people to understand you and people to give you the time of day, then you have to make sure that you do your best to understand them. So that's the second point why we have to listen, so that we can understand others, because it's going to help us achieve win-win outcomes. We get once they feel that they're understood, they'll take it easy, they'll pay attention to us, and then we should be able to get a chance to move this business relationship forward, and then we end up being their wedding photographer or their wedding planner. Now, the next part about why we should listen is something that wedding planners instinctively can agree with. We listen because we're trying to learn and gather information. Now, planning a wedding is not beans. There are lots of things you need to know, not just the date and the venue. You need to get a sense of the budget. You need to get a sense of their personality. You need to get a sense of the vision that the bride has. You also need to get a sense of the vision that the mother of the bride has, or maybe the father of the bride, whoever is the more dominant partner. You need to be able to get a sense of all these visions and aspirations that are floating around concerning the wedding, so that you know how to take your own professional touch, apply it to the situation, and bring out something that is going to be beautiful and wonderful, that all parties are going to be happy with: the bride's family, the groom's family, and the bride and her mom or her dad. So that's one other reason why you have to listen. And I'm sure if you ask for those of us who are wedding photographers, all you have to do is just chill with wedding planners for a bit, pick their mind on this, and you'll find out that this is actually a very important reason why we have to listen. Because if we don't listen, we're not going to be able to learn about our clients. We're not going to be able to gather all the information that we need. And all that information often comes in handy when it comes to crafting our pitch, making our presentation, or working or tweaking on our packages. So, that's it pretty much why we have to listen. Listen to build relationships, to understand others, to learn and gather information. Oh yeah, and one more thing. We should listen to show empathy, because if people feel that you're favorably disposed towards them, then they will let down their guard. Because if you remember in the older episodes where we're talking about Tom Hopkins and his methods for handling sales conversations, Tom Hopkins is that old school American trainer who the material that I quote from, anyway, from him, I think came out in the 70s or maybe in the 80s. I can't remember. But anyway, so he has this thing about the sales process or the sales conversation being divided into two. The first one being the period where you have sales apprehension, and then the other one where you have sales acceptance. So the idea behind sales apprehension is that in the beginning, nobody wants to be sold to. So immediately you meet the bride at the wedding fair, or you show up at the office or her house, she's going to lock up, because nobody wants to be taken advantage of. Weddings are expensive. If she doesn't have to spend 10 million on the wedding, I mean, she'd rather not. So in the beginning, she's going to lock up. So it is only when you listen and they perceive a certain level of empathy that they might let their hair down and start being open about a number of things. About a number of things like start answering specific questions on budget, or maybe what the ideal vision is, or if they're looking at other people, possible competition that they could be working with early on, so that they might be considering. So early on in my business, that was one of the things that I used to do to get a sense of where they were at, because I would come out right and and ask the question like, okay, so who else are you considering? If you go ahead and ask, what's your budget? Some people will say no. I remember once early on in my career as a wedding photographer, I asked that question and somebody said, oh, you want to take advantage of me, Abby? No, you say what it is that you can do it for, and we'll take the conversation from there. So my workaround now became asking about the competition. I'll just ask, oh, so who else are you considering? And they would call certain names, and automatically I would know exactly what ballpark they are within. So bottom line is, you call someone and you say, okay, so who else are you considering? If they say, oh, I'm considering T.Y. Bello and Kelechi Amadiobi, then you know that these people are incredibly upscale, and they probably have $1 million and over to floss with when it comes to wedding photography. So anyway, I wasn't supposed to go down that route. Where was I? Empathy. Okay, yes, show empathy. So bottom line is, you show some empathy and you might get them to lower their guard. So we are past the 10-minute mark, and so I'll wrap it up here. Thank you very much for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based event and wedding photographer, Tabeshima Ayede. I will catch you guys at the next recording, where we will keep riffing on some things listening related, and hopefully in another 3 or 4 sessions, we should be able to bring all of this part to a close, the whole communications bit. So thank you very much for your time and attention. I will catch you guys at the next recording.